Welcome to the CPTM Open House, Day 3, during the Commonwealth Summit Week in London from the Smart Partners Hub. And the Open House initiated on Friday under the umbrella of spotting signals for tomorrow, but for leveraging the value of knowledge and data through smart partnership in the Commonwealth and for the Commonwealth, is the theme under which various initiatives are making a contribution, and a 1 hour and a half discussion at the hub as well as within the countries themselves who are going to join us through teleconference will make a contribution towards the next phase, 2018 to 2020. So today is about quality and standards, a new strategic role in the national digital landscape. Yesterday there was quite a discussion, more in-depth, about data and digital landscape, but with reference to national statistics. And but the value of data and the discussions that took place yesterday, which have been in the evening yesterday transmitted to all the Smart Partnership movement, together with the recording of this webcast, the issues related to value of data are related also to the quality and standards, as it was related to the financial inclusion, which was discussed on Friday. And again, you have got the webcast and all the notes related to that. So, we understand Ambassador Godfrey Magwenzi joined us.
Yes, Mihaela has just joined. How are you? How is everybody there?
Okay, well, we should say Your Excellency, or could we call you Godfrey, Smart Partnership Hub?
Godfrey is much better.
Okay, fine. So, thank you. So the others will join. Alan, you are kind of co-chairing and co-initiated this attention given to the Bureau of Standards within the Commonwealth context for the quality and standards inclusion initiatives in the last so many years. You were Secretary General of ISO at that time. You were in Zambia, where we had a Mulungushi dialogue. You were quite impressed about the kind of value that type of interaction has. You brought it in within the ISO context. Since then, the Commonwealth group in ISO annually is meeting on the side and briefs all the other members about what they are up to. So here is the week when we want to...
This is Sam from Kampala.
Welcome, Ambassador. That's another ambassador, otherwise Professor. You're Ambassador to Somalia. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I will come back to brief all of you who is here with us and who is online. But yeah, please, Alan.
Well, thank you, Mihaela, and good morning to all. This issue of leveraging the value of data gives me the opportunity to illustrate one aspect of the usefulness of international standards, and also the role of national standards bodies as the gateway to accessing such international standards. Data in itself has no value. It is just an information. If it cannot be exploited, exchanged, processed in a way that it delivers applications. So this is where standards come into the picture, because coding an information, making it available to others, organizing it in databases, exploiting the data through mechanisms to take out of the data useful global information, protecting the data is absolutely key. international standards have precisely that role, to enable the exchange, processing, protection of data. This is one category of standards. There are many other standards that I will come back to, because standards in themselves are data that you can leverage, but I will come back to that. Let's focus on the value of data, and I will just take 3 examples to illustrate the value of standards in relation to data. First relates to financial services, which is a theme that we have concentrated on, particularly in the CPTM context. Take 2 simple things: your PIN code and your IBAN. IBAN is the international bank account number that is used to process exchanges of money. And your PIN code, you use it.
Is Kampala 29ers online? Are they online? Rachel?
Look, not so clear. I'm getting some small minor interferences.
Okay, these are you 29ers in Kampala probably, but who is online? Aisha?
Florence is online. Florence is online.
Florence. Okay, well done.
Yes, and Rachel.
And Rachel, well done. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Please, Alan. Sorry.
Yeah, I was giving these 2 examples that everybody knows, and of course the back office of IBAN and the PIN code is very complex. Many standards are involved to secure that information that you use in financial services. Second example is exchange of information in the manufacturing sector. There are a whole series of standards, the STEP standards in ISO, which means standards for exchange of product model information. And this is a way to codify all industrial parts and components that you may think of. Millions. Now, you are a factory, you are a customer, you want to order a certain component, you have to explain in a standardized way the characteristics of that component. These standards are used all over the world. The third example that is not yet so operational, but becoming so, is in the health sector. The individual medical file, for which ISO has an international standard that is becoming more and more used to codify your individual medical information in order to optimize the way your health is being cared for. So these are examples, and the main producers of these international standards are ISO, IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, and ITU for telecoms, since we are in the digital transformation area. I will not elaborate more on this, but in passing I should say that you should leverage the value of standards as data, and there are standards in many, many areas: production, manufacturing, quality management, trade, environmental, energy efficiency, etc. And this is another role of the national standards bodies, is to bring to their national community the value, leveraging the value of these standards to improve manufacturing, improve trade, improve the environment, improve health, apply in e-governance and financial services, for example. And I can elaborate on that too later. So these are, one specific is the value of data and how international standards contribute. And then the second aspect that we are advancing in CPTM is how standards themselves may be used as data to improve trade and economic and social transformation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so thank you. I mean, based on that, who would like to follow with another dimension which emerged, maybe still going on the value of digital landscape and standards before we lose that dimension? Maybe Pete, private sector, on the financial, because he mentioned financial, and then maybe Paul,
Okay,
or either.
let me
Or you
speak briefly on the financial dimension, because basically, you know, as a company we come from the financial sector, although we're becoming much more involved in many other sectors as well. Because
You need to remind the world who you are.
So I'm Paul Ferris, I'm the CEO of a company based in London, Object Tech, and we are developing an identity system that can be applied across borders and by any country, any sovereign country.
If you can.
Okay. So we actually have really based our business on the development of international standards underpinning something that's new in the digital world, which is to be able to provide a single identity for individuals. That's the individual owning their identity. And that means that there has to be some trust in the system, so that when you present your identity, that people that you're presenting it to, whether it's a border guard or a financial institution, a bank or whatever, has some reason to trust what you say. So if I say I'm Paul Ferris, there has to be some trust that I'm actually Paul Ferris. So we've developed a system that we are internationalizing by using international standards. And we're using some technologies that people might be aware of. Blockchain, for instance, is very much in the news, but other technologies as well. So it's very important for us that this becomes one international standard in an area of technology that principally hasn't existed before. So this is all new, and it
New
needs,
like 1 year, 2 years?
It was
As an application?
as a set of standards. It was kicked off only almost 14, 15 months ago.
Yeah.
So very, very, very new. The technology has existed for 20 years. The idea of a blockchain has only really become to the fore, let's say, 7 or 8 years ago. It's that. So relatively new, actually. It's in the way that everybody now knows the internet. It actually existed for many years before it became a sort of public knowledge.
But actually we have Professor Michael Peter knows,
Right.
who is telling us that the blockchain technology is there since that's distributed ledger for years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Tom Cratchit in Dickens wrote in a ledger.
Exactly, in a ledger.
And once the point is, once it's in the book, once it's in the ledger and it's agreed there, it's there. That's the immutability, and that's the trust which comes from it.
Is a trust, but actually specifically as an application, it
As
became visible because of the development of digital landscape.
That's right.
Can I ask a sort of stakeholder question? So you say you've got this, and you're talking to someone as part of a trade deal, or you're trying to get a consultancy or whatever. Then someone says, well, prove to us. I mean, you say everyone accepts it, and it's safe, right?
Mm.
How? And this is when it comes back to agencies, and I say, how do we know that it is? You know, I mean, I haven't heard your spiel, and I trust you because you look a nice, honest person. But
Thank you.
But tell us, which agencies have to have verified this? Because this is highly relevant in the changing context of British trade and Commonwealth trade and the EU and so on. So how do you prove to someone that actually this will work?
Yeah, and overall, we use the existing system in that I have a passport, I have credentials, and they are as trustable as they are.
Mm.
You know, but the process I have to go through to prove to you who I am is that I just have to present those credentials, and then crucially, you as the person, the customer or service provider or whatever, need to assess those credentials against the normal criteria. That's what you do. That's the existing system. The only thing that we're providing actually is a way for me to pass those credentials in a completely trusted way to you, so that you'd actually, if you can see those credentials, and for instance they're my passport credentials, they are actually, it is the same data that is held on the passport office's database. So you are looking at my passport data and you're saying that that is not dependent on a piece of paper or any tokenized means, mobile phones or things like that. This data that you're seeing is actually held on the passport office's database right now. Now that means tomorrow when it's not, for instance, if they make a change or I make a change in my name or whatever, then my new credentials you will be able to see are up to date.
So just to be difficult, there was an item this morning about house fraud, that someone had stolen someone else's house by changing their name by deed poll,
Yeah.
and whatever, right? would that be picked up?
Yes. Yeah, it's there's some detail here, but basically it's not just about the existing system being like a bar that you cross. I am Paul Ferris because I've shown you these details. That might have happened 2 years ago. Are you still Paul Ferris?
Yes.
So what we're able to provide, and this is what we're building, we built into the standards. They're going to be launched in about a month's time in London. Is the ability to say, I was Paul Ferris and I still am Paul Ferris. That means that if I'm, for instance, getting on an aeroplane, so I go to the airport, but my brother walks on instead, looks quite like me, sufficiently like me, then that won't work because my brother can't be me going to the airport, living in London. So those are the far more robust
So there is a description,
ability.
there is a data which is stored in a particular way,
That's right.
trustworthy, which says you are not.
Right.
You are Paul Ferris rather than the brother.
And I think if I can just extend it a little bit back into the standards, the way that we're doing this is very much driven by privacy. So GDPR, the European standards just coming into force quite quickly, and all that depends on saying, well, it's my data that I permission for you to use, and that really our approach is given the mechanism to give that permissioning. The part that actually Pete could probably talk more broadly on is that if you have an identity of this nature and it's a global identity, then people who currently cannot identify themselves in the way that we're all used to, perhaps around this circle, people who can't get a passport very easily, or
Like the Windrush people.
Exactly. Those are the people that actually this system is so much better for.
Yes.
But it's very, very important that whatever system is put in is just as accessible by people like the Windrush people as they are to Bill Gates. The richest in the world have to use the same system as the poorest in the world, or else we will be creating ghettos of identity systems, which is, to me, unacceptable.
So this is, Paul, kind of a more in-depth description of the identity
Yeah, and I'm sorry,
and
it just
standards.
is
But if
based
we
on
go
that,
back
yeah.
to, yeah.
The subject is on standards, isn't it?
Yes.
So, I'm global convener for a particular part of the blockchain standards, for instance, because that is the best place to get this new thing agreed, and there's meetings every 2 weeks actually with potentially 240 different experts around the world. Not all technical experts. This is a broader brush than just technical people getting together to provide a standard way of doing something.
But for your business to succeed, that data that you are collecting has to have been approved by somebody.
Yeah,
And so ISO works to help this achieve it. But
absolutely.
some countries don't have what we called earlier on the back office, which is capable of generating or providing the data in the format which an ISO or your business is going to require, because they don't have the civil service capability. for
Let's be
example.
clear, ISO doesn't certify the data.
No.
It provides the tools to code, exchange, process, digitize, and eventually present
Yeah.
and exploit the data, but it doesn't certify the data
And I agree
itself.
that, but I mean their information has to be produced in a way which would enable it to be certified by ISO.
Your PIN code is not certified by ISO.
No.
It is given to you by your bank,
Yeah.
but it's given to you according to a process which is the subject of an ISO standard.
Yeah.
But just a very layman question which was raised before. It's difficult enough to visualize, to understand that data, never mind the value of data. Then you say the blockchain technology, which is a new technology, new or old or whatever it is, which ensures data storage, ledgers. Yeah? Nobody can fiddle with that.
Mhm.
There, the identity or whatever it is there. And then the issue of bringing in a standard in relation to that technology, which is not visible again, is about data, which is so. All of these are abstracts, which are not quite kind of easily understandable. So how could a Minister of Trade, let me put it like this, that is common order otherwise, how could a central bank governors, how could anyone understand the National Bureau of Standard in one of these countries going to brief them about a standard for blockchain which will support the value of data and all the rest of it? Could you, because as a businessman maybe you are much easier able to explain that.
It's a challenge for anybody to, in an area that is a complex area, not
and
just
invisible.
technically.
Yeah.
There's legal implications, there's regulation, there's social implications as much as anything else. What we have done is to consider what is it that most people who would have an impact on the decision making would understand. So we actually have worked with the Dubai government. It was the Dubai government simply because they were open to doing this, but also because they have, and they are now building one of the biggest airports in the world, and we have the agreement of the Dubai government to provide an identity to fly in and through that airport. Now, the impact of this means that pretty well everybody who is going to affect or help to affect change in this area will understand the problem of going through an airport. And so what we have developed with the help of the Dubais is a process where there are no passport gates at the airport. This is because you already know who's on the aeroplane before they even arrive at Dubai. With the permission of the passenger, the exact same information that you will present normally at a passport gate will be passed on to the Dubais once you get on the aeroplane, so you're heading to their country, and it gives them huge advantages in terms of managing transit or arrival, because if you take away the passport gates, there's an argument to say there's no land or air side. Now, it's an idea that most people will realise would be a very, very convenient thing for everybody. If you could get off the aeroplane and with your trusted credentials already approved, then the Dubai's, the UAE border protection will just need to look for people that they want rather than test everybody who comes through of who they are. So if they want to talk to Paul Ferris because he overstayed his visa last time, then they can come and talk to me as I'm coming off the aeroplane, rather than everybody having to stop to prove who they are in 40 seconds, and then they have to react to say, well, there's Paul Ferris, we quickly need to talk to him. They can plan on which flight I'm coming in and just talk to me.
You get to the baggage hold up quicker.
then you get to the next.
But how does a standard, which is voluntary, you would say, how does a standard come about? Is it in relation to the technology to store that identity data, data related to identity, or is there any other? How does the standard come about?
The standard is crucial because in order for people to trust I am Paul Ferris, there has to be what we call, what's known in the industry really, as a trust framework. So a trust framework is provided by all the different governments at the moment.
So is it being codified by ISO, this global identity thing?
That's what we are
working for.
Publishing in a month's time.
In May.
Yeah.
I think just to announce, Peter Sisson. Hello, Peter, you are online. Can you?
Hi, Peter.
Ah, okay, fine. Hello, Peter. You following the discussion, yeah? Thank you.
Yes.
From BSI.
I think Peter's very aware.
Peter is very aware and will come in when he thinks fit, and so is Godfrey and Sam and 29ers and others. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, so a trust framework is required. Governments routinely provide that route. Now, how well they provide it obviously is varies around the world. But the role of government very often is to provide trust, in that it's a government document in your passport, it's a government driving license, those sort of functions of government. And I think this is where the real interest in in this particular area of standards and its impact on the Commonwealth countries, I think, could really help in developing good governance in a way that's common to all, which is really where we started, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So we use the international standard to say this, wherever you come in from the world into, say, Dubai Airport, or wherever you're banking from, say for Barclays or HSBC or those sort of banks, wherever you're banking from, this is how you will present your data, and this is how it will be assured. In other words, it's been verified that Paul Ferris is Paul Ferris. So that there is one way of looking at the data instead of the existing situation, which is absolutely bespoke among almost every organisation you could imagine.
But then taking another point, sorry, if we're sure the data is right, does your technology have any application to make sure the data, this is the big story at present, is not misused?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Can you just say a bit about that?
Because fundamentally, what we're doing is saying this isn't our data, this isn't our system even. This is why we're standardising it. We're not charging everybody for having their own data. We are just providing the tools for individuals to own and manage their data online in a electronic means.
You do sometimes have what is genuinely fuzzy data. A particular example is where a woman professionally uses her maiden name, okay, but has a passport in her married name.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how would you deal with that in those circumstances? Presumably, you just say those are one of those where they're actually going to have to talk to the Dubai authorities to show that actually Miss So-and-so is really Mrs. So-and-so.
Yeah. Actually, that's not the case in those terms, but it would be. There are still areas. We're not a silver bullet for every situation. For instance, babies are, they're notoriously hard to identify, apart from putting something on their wrist in the hospital. So when you get to the point of identity, it's still a problem. But in the situation of fuzzy data, the example that you provided, you can put that information and manage it within your own context.
Yeah.
What is then required to get through a border would be what's on your passport. The point is then, what your decisions and the decisions of the sovereign state in order to issue that passport still stand.
Paul,
no change.
Paul, instead of identity Paul Ferris or myself or whoever, if we were to say the identity we're talking about is coffee from Uganda, a particular coffee from Uganda, versus or together with coffee from Kenya or from Rwanda or from Peru, because that goes into trade, that is fair trade or otherwise. It's just how would the identity and therefore the standard for the blockchain which ensures that the data to do with the identity of the Ugandan coffee.
So Michaela, what you're describing is the next huge leap, because we've said, look, for individuals, we can identify individuals in a way that's far more useful, not to solve all problems, but it's far more useful, allows the rest of the systems to be systemized. But then, why not use that same approach for companies, for instance, legal individuals, legal entities, trusts and those sort of things. And in exactly the same way, a trust can assert who it is as a legal. That is very important.
A coffee company, for instance.
Okay, so the company, the grower, for instance.
The grower.
And then we've taken it beyond that. It's in the standard, the draft standards that are going to be presented in a month's time also include things, Internet of Things. So we've been working with Airbus for 4 years now, and working with the existing standards, the naming standards, for instance, but the things, and then even the next stage, if you like, I am a real person, I exist. A company only exists in a legal, abstract way, but it does exist. Then there's the Internet of Things, which is generally held to be the things that you can touch or screw onto an aeroplane, those things. And then there is a process, and that's almost like it's a sort of thing, but it's only it's an idea, it's a set of ideas. So actually those 4 coordinates are covered in the the standard, so that all those four things can be presented in a standard way. So for people, for instance, Airbus would like to know that it's an Airbus part that's been screwed onto its Airbus aeroplane, and that's a very, very important part of the supply chain, and so all those things can be accommodated within the same standard, and that's what we've now worked for about 7 years to achieve, and we're just about to standardise through BSI and ISO.
Peter, anything at this point of time? Peter?
Hi, it's Peter Systems from
Yeah.
BSI here. I don't really have anything to
Not
add
at
to
this
that.
point.
I think you know, one of the key areas that we focus in standardisation at the moment is really, you know, the quality and the protection of data, and there is a body of work that's going on at an international level to address that. There's a body of work that's going on in the UK at the moment to look to support the international work in that area.
Okay. But if we're going back to the Sam, are you online? Sam? You're getting there. And Godfrey, I mean, I know you wanted to ask about this coffee of Uganda, because we keep being asked about it. Or, yeah? Do you want to come in? Uh-huh.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. It's very an interesting but difficult area, clearly, because the form of traditional statistics, of course, the Bureau of Statistics do collect data which is very less post mortem data. The problem with some of this data to do with blockchain is that it is real-time data, and it's high speed. The speed of production is high, and issues of quality control, which Peter talked about, and reliability do come up. But even before that, I would like to be briefed on the typology of data that one would think of. I didn't get very clearly. Typology of data, what kind of data would apply? Mihaila brought up the example of trade statistics, the comparability of data in one commodity of coffee. In this, if we are to establish an international standard, or even a national or even a regional one, what would be the typology metrics for this data? This is a very difficult area to work out. To me, it is a very difficult area that just to be starting from. And it will be delivered from a descriptive definition of the type of data and also classification of the same data. So I would like to be briefed on this. If the Bureau of Statistics are going to come in, this is where they start from, it's a kind of traditional question they were asked. Maybe management data might need to be redefined, even the role of the Bureau of Statistics, not to mention the central bank.
Okay.
Need to be thought through. This is my initial reaction to what I've had so far.
Actually, the idea was that, just not to confuse, we were focusing today alongside the data and statistics to the data and standards, and the reason, in addition to the finance. So the idea was that there is a blockchain technology which is visible in relation to data, both in terms of central banks, in terms of statistics, standards, organizations, and for trade and others. Tomorrow we'll discuss about other issues. So what we were brought in right now was the latest on the development of the first ever global ISO-driven international standard for the blockchain technology with an application, for instance, or emphasis on identity of data. So that could be also applied to the statistics, but we're talking now about the what could standards, Bureau of Standards like Ben Magwinda or SAS in Zimbabwe or in Swaziland, what could the Bureau of Standards do in those countries in relation to these new developments that are taking place, not relevant only for standards, but relevant to trade, to central banks? And that's the role what CPTM, Alan, if you can comment.
May I comment on that? Because this gives me the opportunity to illustrate the two levels that we are talking about. The first level is the basic data on coffee. You said, now, you are a producer of coffee in Uganda or Ethiopia or wherever. There is an international standards committee in ISO on coffee, which defines the terminology, the test methods, the information you must associate with what coffee you deliver or you want to export. This is basic. There's no blockchain in there. This is information that you generate as the manufacturer with the help of your Bureau of Standards to determine what information you have to produce, what analysis, etc. Then the second level that we are talking about is much more sophisticated, is how you secure the supply chain so that when you are importing coffee from Uganda, you are sure it is that coffee from Uganda, that batch of coffee from Uganda that you have ordered. So this is what we are talking about. But don't neglect the first level, which is basic, and the role of the National Bureaus of Standards. I could give many examples that before you secure the supply chain, you first have to produce the information that has to be somehow secured, if I may say so.
So Godfrey, how would you see, Godfrey, are you online? No, he's not online. Moses, is Godfrey online? Moses Zungu, are you online?
They're muted.
They're all muted, so what are you doing to me?
You just said Ashraf was online.
No, they are muted. Yeah, no, they're all muted. No, they hear, but they can't be because it's noise.
Can I try to give you a second example?
Online, I'm following the discussion.
I know you are. It's just that when we want to talk to you, don't hear because you're muted. But we're going to sort that out. Godfrey, tobacco. I know that in the last few years, never mind other things like diamonds or whatever, but tobacco. Let's leave it to tobacco. How would SAS, the Swaziland, the standards of Zimbabwe, which is one of the leading Bureau of Standards in Africa, because of the private sector led rather than the other way around in other countries. How do you think the identity related to data for tobacco, identifying tobacco from Zimbabwe, would help? And how could you think that SAS, Eve, who is not available today, could make a contribution in Zimbabwe? What do you think? Because you are in Rome, and if you are told, for instance, you have to bring in tobacco in Europe, yeah?
That's a tough one for me, Nyaila.
Okay, now I know you don't bring tobacco in Europe,
but what I can say is that if there are smokers in that room, every cigarette you smoke, it has a Zimbabwean tobacco in it because our tobacco is used for blending purposes.
We didn't know that. You see, that's an identity crime.
Yeah, it's good for blending to give a flavor to tobacco grown in other countries. It has to do with the soils, the type of soils that we have, and also the atmosphere. Yeah, because those actually matter when you are talking about cigarettes. This is why when someone buys a cigarette, I can't give a name now, any name of cigarette that you have.
Paul, what are you smoking?
It's a brand. So what it means is that a customer in Australia and another in Latin America and one in Vanuatu, when they smoke that cigarette, it should taste the same.
Because of Zimbabwean tobacco. Yeah. That's it. No, I mean the blending sort. Okay. So the question would be, how would this, can you pick it up? How would I blockchain
Well,
technology understand that?
Differentiate between Zimbabwean tobacco and Cuban tobacco.
The Cuba, how can you differentiate Cuban to Zimbabwean tobacco, Godfrey? Or is that useful?
You can
Godfrey?
differentiate it partly by the supply chain, the route through which it has come. So you
That's-
can monitor the route
Okay.
through which it has come, and if you monitor each stage, then you can follow that.
Actually, what we can understand more is, sorry, Alan, but is the supply chain and the trade. That's why we are focusing on that. And Martin, can you come in on trade more? On the trade, how important is this supply chain to be facilitated by such
Well, I mean, obviously,
identity?
people buying
technology.
something want to be satisfied that they are getting what they actually asked for.
And at the
So-
cost.
And at the cost. I mean, coming back to Paul's point about Airbus and the spare parts, I mean, there have been so many stories about people buying or being given parts which weren't actually proper Airbus parts. In the car industry, it's renowned for people sniffing odd bits of spare parts which have not come from the manufacturer. So therefore, this is where having a standard and somebody being able to satisfy that I've ordered X and I'm getting X.
On the other hand, you want flexibility as well.
Omar was from the beginning setting up the CTRM, which was one of the suppliers, was likely to be Airbus, the composites technology. Omar, the issue of standards, when the composites have been set up to produce parts, likely parts, for among others Airbus. Did you think about involving standards in, for one reason or another, never mind data at that time?
No, we were only an OEM manufacturer, so what we have to do is to conform with the requirement of the
What is OEM?
that's original we just manufacture what is designed or prescribed by them.
But even then,
so that the standards so-called come from there. But I want to come in to say, okay, if standards to me is to guarantee uniformity, to guarantee conformity.
Yeah.
How does that jive with the idea of improvement, innovation, and all this, which is which may go against the set of criteria for conformity and uniformity?
Well, this is a classical question about standards and innovation. There's a lot of literature about the interaction between standards and innovation, and there's a lot of literature demonstrating that standards favor innovation in the sense that they are not with obligation of means, but with test method that can determine the characteristics or the value of a certain parameter or performance of a product. So standards are, on the contrary, a way to disseminate innovation, because they open markets, especially international markets, because they provide a common language between suppliers and producers all over the world, that they can discuss the performance of a product or a part or whatever in common terms. So standards are not uniformity. Standards are ways to determine the characteristics of a product and the compliance of the product to a given requirement, a requirement by a regulation or a requirement by a customer, and therefore these are tools to disseminate innovation and not to hinder innovation.
If we go back to tobacco or coffee, what you're saying, there is a generic standard for coffee.
No,
If
there
you
are,
see-
there are standards. No.
No, if you say this, if you say coffee, this is what is coffee, and it's not
processed
This is coffee
Yeah,
in
not
Uganda.
coffee.
No, but Uganda and all that, those are specific. Those to go back to agriculture, there are variants of coffee plants. Just like in tobacco, there are variants of tobacco plants. The one in Zimbabwe, it was Virginia tobacco. Specific variant of the tobacco plant for that.
Like
But
specific
over and above that, there is
tropical woods,
basic
for instance. Yeah.
the generic for tobacco and generic for coffee. I think this is where sometimes we get confused.
The standard, for instance, can explain what is Robusta and what is Arabica, for instance, because this is something that the consumer is exposed to. You buy Arabica, or you buy Robusta, or you buy other
Or
forms.
halloumi Cyprus.
And Robusta and Arabica are produced in various countries.
Yeah, but they're all coffee. But there are more subtle differences.
Yeah. The tropical woods, for instance, in Malaysia, that's a big problem
So this
on
is where
the
the-
international market, in the timber market.
Because for the tobacco in Zimbabwe, if I remember correctly, the variety that they grow was called Virginia tobacco. So that went into all the tobaccos. When I was growing up, all tobaccos, cigarettes in Malaysia will say they're Virginia tobacco. And when Ian Smith grabbed the power, then there was people stopped doing business with Zimbabwe. The tobacco people wanted to find another place where they can grow tobacco, Virginia variety. They came to Malaysia. That's how we started the tobacco growing in Malaysia, because of Ian Smith. But of course, I think
It's one thing to
Here,
thank him for.
Godfrey.
Similar to what you have been saying, Omar, talking about halloumi cheese.
Halloumi
Now,
cheese,
there
people
is
don't
the
know the
Cyprus
cheese.
halloumi cheese, and there
That's
is a
very
standard.
important.
The Cyprus Bureau of Standards has adopted local only two standards, one for halloumi cheese and the other for solar heaters. Every other standard has
Solar
been
panels.
adopted from ISO. Now, halloumi cheese, according to the standard, there is a sheep's milk 51% and cow's milk 49%. If it's not this ratio, it's not called Cyprus halloumi cheese. Now, Holland is also making halloumi cheese, but their standard is
Marks
not
and
the
Spencer
same
makes
because
them.
they don't have sheep, they have cows. So the cow's milk for halloumi cheese from Holland is of
Well,
a
that's
different
identity
standard
problem.
to the Cyprus. Now, even in Cyprus, some manufacturers make
Yeah.
halloumi from cow's milk only, cheaper. So if you want to buy true Cyprus halloumi cheese, you have to be, the trader has to be certified under ISO 9000 series, where you have a certification of being trustworthy and reliable. So a trader who's certified under ISO 9000, that one, he is a trusted trader who says that I'm supplying halloumi cheese according to the Cyprus standard.
Where does data come about here? Say halloumi. Pop.
Well, there's data everywhere.
No, but say there's a description of halloumi, right?
Yeah. I think the fundamental problem from our perspective is that the data is produced wherever the data is produced, but transferring it in a trusted way to people, whether it's the customer, whether it's the retailer, is a difficult thing. It's done
there is
with
the
pieces of paper
identity.
and rubber
Yeah.
stamps still in the supply chain. And to the extent now that we're working with a retailer who actually wants organic produce, and they want to know that it is organic because they are saying it's organic in their shops. So they are much more concerned about, first of all, knowing that this is an organically grown crop, and that it is only the crop from that place that they are putting on the shelves, because they are becoming liable for these sort of things. So it's is a great example of the, if you like, the identity of a crop, and all the other aspects of it, whether it's made of cow's milk or goat's milk, or those are all aspects of everything that is being produced. An Airbus part.
So it is actually this. These smart ledgers, the blockchain technology based or distributed ledger technology, however you want to call them.
But that's what we're dealing with. But the conversation is wider than that, isn't it?
Okay.
It's
So
wider.
coming to Omar's point about standards, uniformity, conformity, and Alan, you made a point that you did not think the standards stifled creativity. Now this I have to disagree with you, I'm sure, because the standard is not produced until something has been invented, or enough of it has been invented to make it worthwhile creating a standard. So therefore, a patent comes into the process, presumably, and a relationship between patents as a value compared with a standard as a value. So that my son happens to be inventing some things at the moment which are patented, but which are not in sufficient quantity to create a standard because it's unique. There's nothing like it in the world.
Could you refer to it? Because
it's called solar fluidics. It's a solar thermal panel which is extremely cheap, easy to make, totally green, and is about 20 times more efficient than any other solar thermal panel that exists at the moment.
It's based
It's all
on
black
quantum, very, very interesting.
nanotechnology and
Yeah.
one thing else. Since we met, he's improved it by 10.
And now they are in Malaysia, by the way.
So, how do you deal with standards and creativity and differentiate?
Well, this will need a whole conference, but there is
The impact on trade and value is here.
in standards. You may have some patented technologies embedded in standards, provided they are made available on free and non-discriminatory base. I will give you an example. The JPEG standards are the standards thanks to which you can look at television on your mobile phone and on your television on your computer, and the coding of the images is done through myriads of standards, some of which contain patented technologies for which the producers of the technology have made that information available because it serves their interest in the sense that there are more customers to look at your standardized information. To answer another question briefly, but I think it has to be brought into the picture, the confidence in the data that is provided by manufacturers or suppliers. How are you confident in the information concerning the product?
That's the point.
How do you do that? Well, the elementary way is trust between the customer and the supplier. Now, sometimes this is not enough. So you need to produce data which has been controlled by somebody, by a third party. That third party can be a laboratory accredited for its competence, independent from the supplier. And for instance, in Cyprus, you have some accredited laboratories to analyze your cheese with a third party. Now, if you want to certify not only the data coming from your laboratory, but you want to certify the ability of your factory to produce a product consistently according to the supplier's request, then you use, and there are 1,200,000 companies in the world who use the ISO 9001 standard to demonstrate that they consistently can supply a product according to the customer's specification. And this is called third-party certification, for which there is a policing through accreditation. Now, I'm sorry to be a bit technical, but this is a very major role of national standards bodies, is to bring that message across, and some of our national standards bodies have a subset which does accreditation of laboratories or certification of companies. And this is, in fact, many of the Commonwealth NSBs have that sort of activity. Alongside the standards, it's more commercial, but it also provides revenue to feed the standardization activity, for which developing countries usually don't have a lot of money. And this comes to something CPTM has been advocating, is that the business model of national standards bodies has to be sustainable. And since the national standards bodies in smaller countries do not make a big revenue of selling standards, selling the documents. They have to earn their living in another way, and the other way is usually through conformity assessment. So I'm sorry to be a bit technical, but in the context, and the blockchain that we've been talking about is sort of the top thing in the supply chain, but some more basic things are, how do I convince my customer that my laboratory data is good, that I have so much goat's cheese in my milk, and not just put a cow's milk in the cheese to make it cheaper for me, and still call it Cyprus
halloumi cheese.
Pete,
This is partly about the transfer.
Can you introduce yourself?
Sorry, I'm Peter. I'm a
More
Director
on
of
the
Financial
finance.
Inclusion for Object-X, so I work closely with Paul for
And you're part of
his
the
sins.
financial inclusion
And I'm part of the Financial Inclusion
in CPTM,
Group and member of
Central Bank
CPTM.
government.
It's about the transfer of trust, and this is in a way what our process can identify, can codify, if you like, or transfer. So you give, or a laboratory takes a certain amount of cheese from a line and does a test on it. It therefore says that statistically this is all okay. And you do that a number of times and you build up a level of trust that the cheese from this manufacturer is likely to be okay. And therefore that trust can be transferred to the organisation and then put forward to a potential buyer. You can trust that this is Cyprus halloumi because we've had it tested times and every time it's been fine. And we trust also the body that has done the testing. So rather than slipping them a fiver, it's actually realistic. But you know, if this cheese is tested somewhere else, so let's say it goes into Tesco's and they do a bit of their own testing, they say that's right, and that trust can be transferred from Tesco's back not only to the manufacturer but also to the... And so trust can be transferred and that can be codified, i.e. it cannot be changed. So if you abuse that trust one time and Tesco say no, then that no stays there. And it cannot be removed by you. And that's the immutability and that's the trust.
So that is probably the reason why we were very much interested in alerting through NSBs, the Ministry of Trade or heads of government or whoever they are, about the use of blockchain technology, which is connected to data, connected to this trust.
Yeah. But before you go there...
No, hold on 1 second. When this standard for blockchain technology will be kind of approved and so on. No, just one thing. Will that, no, because we were expecting that the standard would be a definition of the blockchain technology. Because one thing that NSBs in developing countries in particular do not have is a plain English to explain to the others, plain words, what is a blockchain technology. And it has to be a standard definition for that, not a definition for the standard, yeah? So would that be included into the
very first step in the new standard is to define what we're talking about.
What is a blockchain technology?
And the words that we use.
And what is not.
And the
and
ontology and the architecture of the... Yeah.
So it makes literally the role of National Bureau of Standards are the key promoters of what is and what is not a blockchain technology in a country. There are no other.
A standard that is not used is useless.
Yeah.
So the promotion of the
Do
standard.
you have an idea of when this first standard on definitions and terminology will be published?
I've got a short presentation I can send you in any case.
Yeah, it would be very useful.
Working Group 1 is also presenting in May in the London meeting. It just happens that TC307 is meeting in London this May, and their very first draft is going to be produced in the 14th of May. And so the working parties are all now producing after a year, which is a very short time, really. Already producing themselves.
I would recommend that national standards bodies in countries, because not all of them are interested in just now in the blockchain. Those who are interested are those who produce products which, you know, need to be secured as a batch, as their origin in the supply chain. Take an example, diamonds. You have a few developing countries quite interested in diamonds. The diamond industry has introduced the blockchain to identify a particular diamond in order that it is truly the diamond that was ordered, and it is not some kind of black diamond that was produced somewhere else. Now, I recommend that the NSBs in developing countries look into their own industries and see where the blockchain may become a way to secure the origin of a supply. I remember Malaysia, we had a presentation here with a very nice table where your Malaysian expert explained all the applications of blockchains, the sectors where it can be applied. And I would recommend that our NSBs look at that, CPTM may disseminate that, and then they say, well, we are interested in this subject because we are producing diamonds, or because we are producing this or that, which will become, or because of financial services. And then they can register as observer members in the ISO technical committee. Then they will receive the working drafts on definitions, for instance, and then they can become a bit more aware of what is happening in international standards. So frankly on this, I don't think all developing countries are interested by blockchains. I think some of them are more interested to sell their cheese or to sell their wheat or to sell things where the sort of first level of standards I mentioned are important. But the blockchain is only of interest to those who may be
Let me on behalf of everybody disagree with you. Because you have in Lesotho, which by the way they've got the biggest diamond, but in Lesotho, no, the best thing that they have besides the biggest diamond is the water, is the best water, which is better than the diamond they have, because in Southern Africa there is lack of water. But in Lesotho, in Swaziland, and Moses, are you online? Moses? Okay.
I'm online, but I'm continually muted. Okay.
No, now you're not muted. No, you are listening. But you see, in Swaziland, it's a small country, developing country. One would say, why would you be interested in blockchain technology? Or they could say, why should I be now? I have other things to do right now. But the thing is, I don't think Swaziland is left alone by people from outside. Even if they don't want to, or ISO considers and UN consider, they still have to go somewhere to be interested in blockchain technology. You have, particularly from the central banks, financial sector, you have all these promoters of cryptocurrency or whatever saying, come and listen to blockchain technology, because if you do, then you're going to buy Bitcoin, for which I give you so much. Is that kind of thing. Moses, can you come in? So if, and explain, because if you have the SWASA, the Swaziland Bureau of Standards, armed with a definition of blockchain standard, they could be the point of reference in that country, yeah, to explain what is and what is not blockchain technology for it, before they reach the sophisticated application of the supply chain and all the rest of it. So, Moses, do you want to come in?
Well, I'm better listening in Ireland because I'm gathering a lot of ideas from people presenting, and I think these are the people who know a lot about these issues.
Okay.
So I think I'm okay listening.
Okay, Moses is the head of Smart Partnership Hub in Swaziland, in Prime Minister's office, and anyway, he was involved in a number of things where he had to brief and where he to have also a repository of blockchain standard development. Then he could bring them in with him to brief other people. So that is another aspect of this importance of the definition of this standard of blockchain technology. But Ashok, are you online?
Yes, I am, madam.
In India, in New Delhi. I mean, the issue of the value of data in India probably is a little bit beyond that, isn't it? I mean, you are leading in this field.
Let me come into the earlier example of tobacco, now diamond or whatever. Now you see, these are interestingly, the reputation characteristic is developed or grows from producer to the consumer and back and forth. You see, the point is that none of these are technologically specifiable. These are geographical markers. Now, a basmati grown in a particular place can be basmati, cannot be basmati. Therefore, it's the grows, the person who grows, the person who buys, packages and sells. Is this chain, the reputation of this chain really establishes the product. The question is, who is monitoring this chain? If there are consumer feedback that this is wrong, this is not satisfying, and so on and so forth, they are still within the chain. There is no independent assessment. It's like Facebook, likes, dislikes. You order a product online, you go by number of stars. One is never sure whether the stars have been genuine or they are genuine customers.
Yes.
So I think somewhere one has to think of some kind of a data, some kind of a blockchain type of data, where this, the whole standard grows out of human experience rather than through specific numbers, measurable numbers. So I think this is one area which is of extreme importance.
Yeah.
Almost all of us who niche products, whether it's Alfonso Mango, whether it's coffee, whether it's tobacco, have a huge value, or whether it's diamond. And the question is, some of these products, diamond for example, probably may be amenable to some kind of spectral analysis. But when it comes to wine, when it comes to the taste of the customer cannot be quantified, then how do you give it a characteristic standard, if you want to call it? It's not uniformity, but yes, it is genuine.
Ashok, you don't know, we have Alan here on wine. He will come back.
This is an area where there are blockchain applications, and we have somebody in our community.
Exactly.
Because there has been a lot of counterfeiting of prestigious French wine, among others, but especially French wines, because they are so expensive. So that because of the counterfeiting, you need to trace the whole life cycle of Chateau Margaux or Prestige of Petrus. And this is where the blockchain is already in application. And I am in relation with some prestigious French wine producers who are daily users of the blockchain concept today to secure what happens to their wine once they have sold it.
Can I?
Ashok, do you want to continue or?
No, I think that's precisely the blockchain technology comes in such cases very well, I think.
I would really like to pick up something that Martin said some time ago.
Okay.
Can I do that now, Adam?
Yeah, please.
Because you said aerospace parts, right? Now the business of you must have genuine parts, which will cost you a lot more, is an interesting area.
Yes.
I mean, I have a printer, which I have 2 or 3 printers actually. But anyway, I have a printer. When I put the new cassette in, right? It says genuine HP parts installed for this HP 5740, right? I have an old printer which I've had for 15 years. It's a huge, cumbrous thing. To get the proper, they're not cassettes, they're sort of what they're toners. It's a big thing. No, it's huge. They're £120 each, right? But there's a firm which actually produces replacements, and I suppose they wouldn't pass the genuineness test but they're a quarter of the price and they work perfectly well. Now, my question is about price and rigidity. That if you have something which is too dependent on the specific authentication, then are you putting prices up? And are you, thank you very much, discouraging people who genuinely have an alternative which is cheaper and which works? Now, I don't know, it's an area of fraud, inventiveness, enterprise, and so on. I don't know what your view is about that making a thing. Do you have a view about that?
I do, because I used to work at Rolls-Royce, and
right.
one of my, and this was straight from university, one of my first achievements at Rolls-Royce was to employ a man with a 13-pound hammer to destroy the parts that Rolls-Royce had built up over 60 years, so they couldn't be resold once they'd thrown them away. So the genuineness of a Rolls-Royce part was absolutely crucial, because put an aftermarket, should we call them, rather than an OEM part in a Rolls-Royce engine, and there's huge liability involved. Putting a printer cartridge into your printer,
and it doesn't matter.
Well, apart from wasting some paper if it's not a very good printer cartridge. So there's no answer to it. There's a spectrum between those things that are crucial in life,
exactly, yes.
the Rolls-Royce part in a Rolls-Royce engine, and a printer cartridge in, that doesn't work, well, probably does work just as well. Whether it stifles innovation or cheaper prices in medicines, for instance, is a very good example. Diamonds, of course, are expensive enough for everybody to care, but medicines and counterfeiting medicines is rife everywhere. The problem, part of the problem, it's only part of the problem, is actually transferring the information that is about that product to the person that's then going to assess the product. So to Ashok, I think it was said online, these things need to be assessed. I used to work for a company called SGS, which is one of the biggest companies of laboratories, and they test things, but their test results have to be transferred to the end customer in a reliable way, and they are fairly Heath Robinson in some industries, where it's a piece of paper and with the official stamp that is an SGS stamp, or those instances are right across our economy. But I would say, though, that the places that are most disadvantaged by not the right stamp, the information not getting to the customer so it can be properly assessed, is probably not the developed countries of Europe, for instance, but other areas where there's more opportunity for slipping in a false certificate or which a blockchain and an identity of these different parts. That's a hard part of this.
University degrees.
University degrees. But on a practical level, just to mirror what I was talking about, actually having a trained person screwing on the part in a Rolls-Royce engine is just as important as having the right part. And using the right tool to put it on is just as important.
It was the right part, but it fell off the plane.
If you buy a Rolls-Royce, you're nearly going to get stuffed on prices.
but just Paul, when you discussed within the committee and other committees in relation to this standard for blockchain technology,
this is genuine
standard is a voluntary standard, right? But is referred all the time also in the context of
Malaysian Bahulu brought from Kuala Lumpur, so it's right.
It's
not counterfeit. Genuine Malaysian
Okay, this is a Malaysian open house. I'm sorry, those who are online, they are going to get from Omar the recipe for.
Are we still on television?
We are an open house. So
are we still on television?
We are on, but I wanted to say that this blockchain technology standard related to data, related to will be in a context of a quest for more regulatory framework, where legal framework itself in that country or in that sector also has a say. I mean, we have a legal expert here, and we discussed in particularly central banks are all the time referring to the regulatory, never mind the standards for blockchain, which may assure this and that for them in relation to their cryptocurrency or whatever it is. So how do you bring in the legal
The regulator.
Always will have to be.
in the blockchain
We've worked very closely.
making of the standard?
Yeah, we work very closely with the FCA here and other standards.
What is
bodies.
FCA?
Sorry, the Financial Conduct Authority is the financial regulator in the UK, but also regulators in Australia as well.
In Malaysia. Malaysia is
Well, we
part of the
haven't
committee.
yet. Well, I very much appreciate being able to work with them. But the impact of regulation, in my book, I don't know if it's the official definition, but a standard is something that is agreed and used. It becomes a standard because it's through its use. A regulation.
But it's voluntary.
Well, and it has to be voluntary. If you start talking in my book about a compulsory standard, you're really talking about a regulation. If it's a government that's saying, here is a standard, you must use it, then that's a regulation. That's not really a standard. It moves up, if you like, to a regulation. And there are some regulations that are based on standards. It's not. I understand it's not the normal way in the standards world to, that regulators adopt a standard. I think one of the few, actually Peter might be able to comment better, but one of the few standards that's become used in the UK is the crash helmet for motorcycles, which has been adopted into regulation because there's a standard for a good helmet, and then there's the regulation that says you must use this standard of good helmet to be able to drive a motorcycle in the UK. That's one of the few examples.
But there are some standards more connected with the engineering and technology side. Some others with consumers, some others with management and governance. But this particular standard is connected directly with data and the value of data. And that's why it's a bit more difficult to understand what one
Well,
do.
the value of technical data associated to a product or service or process, this has been on the international scene developed in the past since the World Trade Organization exists and the Agreement on Technical Barriers to Trade. So a whole system has developed of mutual recognition of test data and certificates around the world with specialized organizations to organize this mutual recognition through mutual recognition agreements. It's the International Accreditation Forum, which is for certificates, and it's the International Laboratory Accreditation Conference, or I forget the corporation, and they have mutual recognition agreements across the world. And our national standards bodies have usually in their country a national accreditation body alongside themselves, or sometimes they have that responsibility of the national accreditation body. And you have all these mechanisms to build trust in introducing third parties, like third-party laboratories or in-house laboratories. Talking about motorcycle helmets, you now have a European directive where there is a mutual recognition inside the European Union of the manufacturer's way of checking that his helmet complies with the European regulation. The European regulation makes reference to voluntary standards developed by SEN in that particular case, and either the manufacturer does the tests himself, that his internal laboratory has to be accredited to be competent to do that, or he goes through a third-party laboratory, and that third-party laboratory has to be accredited. So these mechanisms exist, and our national standards bodies within our CPTM family are all familiar with that and connected to their national accreditation body, and sometimes they even have the role of the national accreditation body. So the blockchain that we are talking about and the applications are more for the supply chain.
Yes.
It's not so much about validating the technical data, it's about validating the physical existence of a supply. Either a diamond or a case of good wine or a service, a batch of coffee. And
oil.
so you have to understand that the blockchain is not so much about the technical information, it's about the physical traceability of what you are supplying. And the bread and butter of our NSBs today is more the technical information, and it's going to be, in some cases, they have to get interested in the blockchain because it relates to the supply chain. So Botswana, for instance, is very much interested by the blockchain to certify the origin of the diamonds that they sell. And they have been, in fact, when they brought the diamond stock exchange to Botswana, they now have a stock exchange there. They are fully aware and informed about the blockchain developments. But again, Mihaela, maybe all of them may become interested someday, but some of them are more, we must alert them.
Yeah, that's it. No, I mean the Omar.
No, I just want to go to personal data. The big thing now, the Facebook and all that. Can standards do something about that?
About personal data?
About Mark Zuckerberg?
No. Can you help Zuckerberg to get him out of the hot water?
He's not in hot water. We are in hot water. We don't understand.
He's in hot water.
He's in hot water. Everybody is. So on a personal data, can standards come in to help?
Well, fingerprints, the identification of people, all these are ISO standards. The technicality behind how you digitalize your fingerprint and your electronic passport.
To what is happening to our data on Facebook, for example, and how that's being used to make Brexit happen, and to bring Mr. Trump.
Can we take that?
Malaysia's
Omar, could we take that tomorrow? Because tomorrow is a digital landscape more into that. Actually, that's what it's about.
Can I just make a comment about what you're saying?
In relation to standards.
Yeah, because if Zuckerberg had built Facebook today, given that we all know the impact of what's happening, he probably wouldn't be allowed to. And what would be built today, we believe, is something where everybody would hold their own data, which is exactly what we're talking about. So, you know, we're talking about maybe 15 years of development from where Zuckerberg says, I will own your data, and any pictures, so that could be a profile picture, for instance, your passport data, I will own that data as soon as you upload it onto my system. What we're saying is that everybody should have their own system, in effect. We're providing tools, which are free of charge, because the use of those tools then can generate revenue for us, not the ownership of your data. And then it wouldn't be for us as the new Zuckerberg, for instance, to decide what you do with the data. We're giving you the tools to decide. That's
actually the trading of that data could be one.
You could decide to trade your data, but it is up to you then.
Let's go back to the Commonwealth Foreign Affairs Ministers meeting today. And last year, the first Commonwealth Ministers of Trade having met last year. And again, Peter, are you still online? I don't know, Peter Sisson? They are muted. Are they muted?
Well, they've probably gone for lunch.
Well, we will be finishing. I want you to...
Your line has been muted.
Peter is here. No, Peter is on our time scale. I think it's Ashok and the others who are on a different time scale. And they're already tea and so on. In Rome, you are almost... But, Peter... last year, BSI made an input to the Commonwealth Ministry of Trade, yeah?
Yes.
And this year, you are also, I mean, we made an input last year trying to put the ISO's message on behalf of this Commonwealth Bureau of Standards we have in the Inclusion Initiative on their role, strategic role, emerging strategic role. But what has happened with that? Is there anything transpiring this week? the Commonwealth Minister of Trade this week.
So I'll just give you an update. Sorry, I did want to sort of jump in a few times to talk about blockchain and its application and the use of voluntary standards, mandatory technical regulations and the like, but my line was on mute, so I can...
sorry, there were the others who had to be online. Yeah.
That's fine. Just we can pick that up at a later stage. Just to say that yesterday, well, we've been working with the UK government to look to see how standards can play a stronger role to support trade and development across the Commonwealth. So we've been primarily working with the UK's Department for International Development and the Department for International Trade, and we have agreed to develop what we're calling a Commonwealth Standards Network, which was announced by the British Prime Minister yesterday at the opening of the Commonwealth Business Forum. What this will look to do is provide a peer-to-peer platform for national standards bodies throughout the Commonwealth to really share their experience and really support one another with their own development. It will aim to increase both the usage of international standards throughout the Commonwealth as a tool to deliver greater intra-Commonwealth trade, but it will also try to support national standards bodies throughout the Commonwealth to play a stronger role in terms of the development of international standards. So that was announced yesterday. We've been given some funding by UK government to deliver this over 2 years, but we really see this as a mechanism that we will look to build on in the future. So, you know, that we see that this will be a very strong support network for national standards bodies throughout the Commonwealth to really support one another and to develop and grow together. I think, you know, things like blockchain are very, very interesting, and I'll sort of just go back to the point that Alan made quite a while ago about actually, you know, it's very good for Commonwealth national standards bodies to participate and observe in the activity that's going on at an ISO level to really understand what's happening in terms of the development of blockchain standards. But blockchain standards aren't the end point. So, you know, as you said, they can be used to create confidence within supply chains. I think going forward they may also be able to help companies to meet regulatory requirements, but they won't be regulations in themselves. So I think the greater knowledge of what's happening with blockchain development is great throughout the Commonwealth, but it should only be applied in areas where there is a distinct need to do it, and I think that's what sort of everyone should reflect on, that actually, you know, sort of domestically it can deliver, for example, land registries, and there's conversations going on in the UK about how blockchain technology can actually ease up processes for registering who owns land in the UK, and that can be applied around the world. You know, for diamonds, for example, it can demonstrate where diamonds have come from, the pedigree that they have. So, you know, blockchain is an enabling technology. I don't think it will be used or should be used in every application, but it is an area that, you know, there's a lot of interest in, and we'll see that development over the future.
I think it's predominantly for central banks all over the place. So, but it became quite... Peter, you want to come in?
I mean, just to disagree, I don't think it's predominantly for central banks at all. I think it will be used across the fiscal and commercial landscape globally, and that will build over time.
Okay. Well,
and it will evolve. You know, with the starting to see, you know, the work in standards development will look at the start in terms of the terminologies for blockchain, but then it will move on to areas like smart contracts, and I suspect in 5 years' time, the way that business relationships are managed will be very, very different to what we see now, and you know that application will be based on the blockchain infrastructure.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things that within CPTM interface for so many years with the Bureau of Standards, in fact, it wasn't only the last 7 years, it was the beginning, in fact, when in Caribbean, and even now, anything to do with a real application of technology is to do with food and agriculture. and those are part of what we call today National Bureau of Standards, most of them. And quality management, for instance, in which Cyprus, Malta, within the Caribbean participated, was one of our beginning. Most of the Commonwealth, most of the successful Commonwealth programs, for about 4 years, with Shell International. But in the last few years, we continue to observe that if you go in any of the country, Bureau of Standards have got one of the highest number and the best of employed science and technologists and engineers. And as different from if they go to universities, they go to National Council for Science and Technology, or they go to all sorts of other things. So there is their inbuilt capability in a Bureau of Standards of related to technology, and for that reason, things to do with a new digital landscape is a kind of very relevant to engage National Bureau of Standards. In Swaziland, in Namibia, in Zimbabwe, and so on, most of the chemists who are in the field, as different from teaching or other things, are in Bureau of Standards. So, our British Prime Minister announced yesterday to the Commonwealth. What did you say? Announced the formation of? Because we talked about this before.
Yeah, a Commonwealth Standards Network. So it's going to be an online tool that national standards bodies throughout the Commonwealth can discuss issues that are affecting them and support their own development.
Okay, so and that's a British-led initiative. So I suppose.
No. It's initially a UK-funded program that's being funded as a result of the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting this week, but it's not a British-led initiative. This will be fully inclusive.
During the Commonwealth Summit, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it will deliver on behalf of members who will be national standards bodies throughout the Commonwealth, but it's not driven by the UK. It's not meeting UK objectives. What it's doing is supporting growth, economic growth, prosperity, and trade throughout the Commonwealth by bringing together this into a formal mechanism.
How generous was the government? How generous was the government, Peter?
How generous was the government? Sir Martin Lang is asking. He was in the Board of Trade before, Chairman.
Yeah, so they've given us some seed funding, and what that means is that we will develop this network and this platform, but there will be a number of associated training programs and workshops with national standards bodies throughout the Commonwealth to help them to develop their own capacity to develop standards domestically, but probably more importantly to play a stronger role in terms of actually international standards development.
So in other words, not much money.
When you say online,
not a huge amount of money.
Come on, 100,000, 200,000.
There's enough funding to actually get this off to a very, very good start, and we've started to socialise this with all of the Commonwealth national standards bodies and received quite a high level of support. So, it's something that BSI and Commonwealth partners have wanted to do for a number of years, and kind of builds on sort of discussions that we've had over the last 5 years, and really it's a good opportunity to really sort of kick-start it. Now, it's not about developing new standards, it's not about developing Commonwealth standards, it's about the use and implementation of international standards, which can really help companies throughout the Commonwealth to really embed themselves into global value chains and increase their export potential.
At CPTM, we call that a smart partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, would CPTM umbrella, which has all these Commonwealth, not Commonwealth, all these Bureau of Standards, trained and nurtured in the last 7 years, would that umbrella be part of, because BSI is part of, would that come handy to the implementation of this Commonwealth thing?
I think Yes, I think like
Yeah,
I said,
yeah.
this is going to be a platform that a wide range of different stakeholders can contribute to. So I think probably, Mahela, we'll need to sit down over the next couple of weeks just to talk about how we can actually practically support that implementation.
Yeah, okay. Well, we look forward to that. But Alan, could you conclude the discussion that we had on this open house today? Because thank you very much, Peter.
I think it's difficult to conclude, or to wrap up. But I would say that our discussion has confirmed really the two levels of the value of standards. The value of standards for the processing and use of data, and the value of standards as data themselves to be used for trade or social transformation purposes. And I'm very happy to hear about this initiative, and I will forget my hat of the Secretary General of ISO a long time ago, but I can readily imagine what you can do in that platform, and my hope, and you have confirmed that, is that the platform will be used to promote the use and the involvement of the Commonwealth countries in the production and use of international standards. Because I think, as you said, Commonwealth standards is not really an issue nowadays in the global world in which we live. And I can see the value of this network that you are considering, and I can also see the value of CPTM as being part of that, because CPTM has the connections with the levels of political, industrial, commercial, financial people in charge that can be useful in the context of raising awareness and promoting the use of international standards within the Commonwealth. So I hope that somehow CPTM will be associated with that initiative, and I'm sure that your colleagues from Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, etc., to name a few, will back up BSI on this initiative.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for those who are still online. I understand the Smart 29ers probably will reflect about today quite powerful discussion, and will probably come in tomorrow, again at about, in fact tomorrow you'll have two parts tomorrow. Day 4. You want to say something quick, please? So, sorry? No. No, that's the Ugandan. Okay, so tomorrow probably you'll come again online, and there will be the focus will be on digital landscape, specifically digital technologies, and with also an introduction overall on how to spot signals for tomorrow, particularly in the context of data. So there are particular methods which have been evolving recently. So there is one of our colleagues who is from Switzerland and another colleague from Australia who is going to present a very, very interesting tool through which one can spot signals, but then direct them towards the private sector to kind of take them forward. And one of the signals is this, anything to do with data. And so that is tomorrow. And Thursday will be probably on national visioning and securing the state. But tomorrow, within the digital technology, the issue of security and cyber security will also be brought in, because it's more a technology issue. So Okay, so thank you very much, and have a good tea, or we'll have a good lunch, a late lunch. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.